We're calling this series Tarot 2 by 2, where we're looking at each card of the Major Arcana with a brief glance to its sibling card, the other side of it. As we've talked many times, the 22 cards lay on the Tree of Life and the Tree of Knowledge. Today we are looking at the High Priestess card. This is the number 2 card. As a very brief recap, yesterday we talked about the Magician card. The Magician has everything, but it's all ideas. But we have to be careful of the temptation to say only ideas. These aren't ideas as in passing fancies. These are ideas that
How
are
do you predict?
carefully wrought and carefully configured descriptions on how to do things. When I think of the Magician, I would think of Da Vinci. He came up with ideas for helicopters, machine guns, diving suits, and humanoid robots, none of which were ever built. But there are detailed drawings of them, and they may have been the inspiration for those incarnations that we have today. I'm saying that we want to be careful when we introduce the Magician, and we say, although in his mind is everything conceivable, we don't want to say they are only ideas. They are the ideas that make possible the creation of things into our universe. And that's exactly what we're talking about today with the High Priestess. And we'll take a good look at her today. The High Priestess. We will see a lady seated between two pillars, one black and one white. She herself wears all white. Her pale crown depicts aspects of the moon. Her inner gown is draped to the ground where it turns into flowing water. On her chest is a white crucifix, perhaps a Christian cross. A pale blue robe covers her head, drapes her shoulders, and folds over her lap. She holds a rolled scroll titled the Torah. And as we know, the Torah is the first 5 books of the Christian Bible. We'll take a very brief look now at what Waite has to say about the High Priestess. And I'm going to omit a lot of it.
Old Testament. The Old Testament.
The Old Testament, yeah. The 5 books, what did I say?
The New.
Oh, my mistake. Yeah, it's the Pentateuch. It's the 5 books of the Bible.
Old
and
Testament.
It's the Old Testament. Yeah, thanks, Joss. According to Waite, she is, in fact, when we're talking about the High Priestess, the queen of the borrowed light, but this is the light of all. She is the moon nourished by the milk of the supernal mother. And that would refer to the moon symbology, and that the moon's light is only the reflection of the sun. We'll move on from there. We'll look behind her, and this is this famous veil. It's decorated with pictures of pomegranates. A golden crescent moon perches at her feet, entangled in the folds of the hem of her gown. The lady is also a gentleman. The High Priestess is where duality and polarity are first separated from the unity. And that may seem a little vague, but when we talk about the Magician, at that time, he is all there was. And it doesn't even exist materially. There are these ideas, these Da Vinci-like, very, very precise ideas. All the ideas and all the components of the ideas are suddenly released into our universe where they're tangible, and that is where the High Priestess comes in. This is where duality and polarity are first separated from unity. We just mentioned that, and it does sound a little bit imposing. To represent this, we have a female at the top of the male column of mercy. This is not a confusion. The High Priestess represents as female to indicate that the two sexes were once combined and were separated into their polarities because it works better that way. This card is number 2 on the Tree of Life. It is on the column of mercy or grow. There are these 2 columns, and we'll get to a little more of them in a while. The column on the right is mercy, which doesn't really work too well in our language today. It symbolizes more growth or lack of restrictions. As in a garden, we've talked about this before, the 2 pillars can be represented. The pillar of mercy would be to allow weeds and mold and insects into your garden. Mercy allows everything. The concept of severity in a garden taken to its extremes would be a garden devoid of all bacteria. So it really wouldn't provide nutrients to the plants very well. In a sense, we can look at this card as the Big Bang. The magician before was unity with everything in potential, and the idea of the cosmic mote, all the planets and everything all contained into one tiny speck. When it's released, everything expands and we get all forms of universal entities known today. The High Priestess knows no discernment, doesn't talk about the qualities of good and bad, severe or merciful, constructive or destructive. The High Priestess releases all things. We'll talk about the 2 pillars that she's sitting in front of. This is the beginning of opposites and polarities. That's the symbolism behind that she doesn't just accept everything. She produces the 2 pillars of severity and mercy, along with her sibling, the Empress. Those pillars now are the left and right, in some cases the good and bad, in most cases the idea of growth and cleansing. These are the 2 pillars that provide movement, that provide the extremes. They also provide the idea of balance, and that's what the middle path that we don't see is. It's the point of balance between the 2 extremes. It does not mean that the extremes should never be entertained, never be used. It just means that the way that we live our lives should be between the 2 extremes. In a sense, the High Priestess ushers in all of reality, and it is what it is, and in time it might become something else. There are many combinations of the things that she has made. At no point can the High Priestess be blamed for anything. She has no malice. She is mercy in the highest incarnation. She has no restrictions. There's nothing she doesn't allow. The crown on her head is the phases of the moon, and that's intuition. And using her intuition, there will be aspects of her imagination, but not an intellectual evaluation. The High Priestess doesn't spend a lot of time deciding the ramifications of what she produces. She just produces. There's no moral consideration for what she produces. Her inner gown, in a sense, turns to water at the hem of her dress, flowing, and water symbolizes imagination, and intuition is one of its aspects. And we see between the moon and the water these aspects of intuition and imagination. The white cross on her chest may indicate Christian values, and the blue robe that flows from her is the beginning, it's creation. It would be forms of the creation myth. She holds in her hand a scroll. It's the Torah. And in the Wheel of Fortune card, you can see that the Torah is written, and when you read it backwards, it becomes the tarot. It's one of those infinity loops of tarot, Torah, Torah, tarot. That's the card that she holds in her lap, and that represents the Old Testament. The veil behind her with pomegranates, which are known for their seeds, is the beginning again of the male and female aspects. It's the inner workings of masculine and feminine that exist in everybody. There are the twin towers. We've talked about those towers of severity and mercy. They do have names. Their names are Boaz and Jachin, and they have their letters on them. Boaz represents severity. It's cleansing and it's restriction. It's not letting some things in. Jachin is mercy, growth, and the admission and the allowance of everything. These two things form a duality of life. We'll look at a few examples of vertical card spreads to see ways of looking at a trilogy of cards that would have the High Priestess in them. If there was a reading like this, we would see the High Priestess, followed by the Two of Coins, and at the end, the Five of Staves. Looking at this, one way of looking at this is there's too much in your life right now. From the bottom up, we see that bickering, the clashing of various plans, the constant kind of meddling of other people in your life. We see in the Two of Coins the idea of having to handle everything yourself, of juggling various things infinitely while standing on one foot. And when we come back to the High Priestess, we see where everything is possible. These three cards together, you might look at it as saying you're doing too much. You are producing too much. You need to streamline and restrict. That's one possible interpretation of those three cards. Let's look at another possible indication here. We have three cards laid down. We're looking vertical 3-card spread. And this would be all possibilities are open to you. From the bottom up, we see the Seven of Swords. Something has been taken from you. This person is sneaking away. Something has been taken from you, or in fact, you are the person doing the taking. And that's the rendition I believe in more. This is a case of you getting away with more than you deserved. And that happens sometimes. People might attribute something to you that you didn't do. You don't have to deny it. It just becomes perhaps part of your reputation. In the second one, we have the idea that you're being offered a gift, but we know this is the monkey's paw kind of gift, and every gift's going to be a trick. So we have, you've gotten something you didn't really deserve. You're being offered gifts that won't materialize as gifts. And of course, at the top, we have the High Priestess, which is everything good or bad being released. With these three cards, you might say something like, all possibilities are open to you, but there seems to be a ripoff going on. There seems to be something unjust, an aspect of thievery going on. And we look at these three cards together, and we know that all things are possible, but there is no moral stance of the High Priestess, so to speak. And we see these other things that bend morality a bit. And we might come up with the idea that there is some danger of something not very just happening. If the High Priestess showed up with these three cards, we might think there's a loss of love. At one point, you didn't realize you had it all. You pushed the boundaries, and it's gone. It reminds me of the song Me and Bobby McGee. Looking back, they realized that what she had at the time was all she really needed, and she let it slip through her fingers. In this case, we would look at the card, Lost Nights of the Soul, people wandering without money, with injuries, and no place to be. We would see this card, which is an interesting card. It's swords, it's anguish, and it has to do with your love life. It suggests that through the use of power, you alienated somebody that you had great affection for. And finally, we have the High Priestess. These three cards together could suggest a loss of love perhaps through your own feelings of power. And those things can't be changed, they can't be retrieved. Sometimes it is a permanent loss. And finally, we'll take a look at these three cards. If these three cards came together, you might suggest the person was undergoing a kind of awakening. Their ideas were leading to more understanding and tolerance than they had before. And this would begin with the bottom card, the World card. This is the bottom of the Tree of Knowledge. It mirrors the bottom of the Tree of Life, which is the Wheel of Fortune. In this card, it's the World, where you have some protection, you have some knowledge. The beasts don't have wings anymore. You have some understanding that you didn't used to have. The second card, Judgment and Awakening. It is the mirror of the Hermit, where you get this inkling of the higher light, and in the awakening, everybody is maturing, everybody is evolving. And of course, at the top, we would have the High Priestess. In a reading like this, all things are possible. With Judgment, we have mass awareness, and with the World, we have personal wisdom. These three might be a card of awakening. We're going to briefly talk about the other side of the High Priestess. The High Priestess is the Big Bang, when hydrogen and helium and ammonia were all flying through the universe, cooling down. We started to get matter coalescing and forming moons and planets and eventually suns, and maybe it was the other way around. The other side of the High Priestess is the Death card. And in tarot, it's always good to remember what death is. Death refers to the ground that originates life. All life, it comes out of something that used to be alive. We don't know how, we don't know why, and we cannot make life out of inanimate material. We try vacuums and electricity and different heat and trying to get amino acids that might one day become proteins, but we haven't done it yet. This is the understanding that we have now, that as the High Priestess is the source of all the materials going out that eventually do form life, living organisms. The Death card reminds us of that circle of life, that death is necessary if we have new life. All life comes from death. All life is born from what was once alive. We don't know about the first life. Nobody can figure that one out. We talk about the way that these trees were formed, and as I've mentioned before, it goes bang, ba-bang, ba-bang, bang, ba-bang, bang, bang. The pairs of Sephiroth were created almost instantaneously and as pairs. They are, in a sense, an amalgam or a unit. And we'll talk more about the other side of the High Priestess next time as we look into the Empress. As the High Priestess produces everything, we might say the Empress refines it. As the High Priestess is the beginning of real stuff in our universe, its mirror on the other tree reminds us that life is a cycle of life and death. The High Priestess was created with the Empress. Together, they create. They're the top of the two pillars. The High Priestess is mercy. All is allowed. We've mentioned that before. There is no restriction with the High Priestess. This is mercy. There's also no blame on her. The magician's concepts spring to reality with the High Priestess in all its combinations. With the High Priestess, more is better. There is no judging of risk or worthiness. The Empress refines what is a kind of distillation, filtration, or a combination of specific environments, keeping out what is not wanted. That's the role of the Empress on the side of severity. But with the High Priestess, we are on the side of mercy. Everything is allowed. The High Priestess comes from a so-called empty universe that was only a field, and we know now it was a 0-point field. What we used to think of as a vacuum or emptiness, it turns out now it is a very rarefied energy field that we really can't see. If we put on special glasses, we would see it was a very pale light everywhere, but with our eyes, we just see blackness. It's really a very faint energy field. It'd be like you took your watch battery and spread its energy out over the entire country. You wouldn't see it, you wouldn't feel it, but once you remove the air and everything else, there would be this very rarefied, light, imperceptible energy field, and that's what's left when everything else is removed. Okay, why don't we turn to some of the questions, Joss?
Chantal says hello.
Hi, Chantal.
And if you want to ask any questions, I'm going to be asking questions. And if you have any that are relevant to this topic, please feel free to write them in the chat. Okay, is the High Priestess a good or a bad card?
There is no such thing as innately good or bad. Anything you can think of can be used for positive purposes or used for what we might call negative purposes. We use severity and mercy or clean and grow instead of good and bad. Without the High Priestess, we would only have ideas. Everything would be exactly the same. It would be unity. She brings in difference and also that balance, that polarity between forces. In a sense, think of the High Priestess as a box of bits and pieces from which anything can be built. What is built afterwards can be considered good or bad, but the High Priestess is innocence. And what she gives us with this box of bits and pieces is a gift with endless potential.
Is the High Priestess less powerful than the magician?
I'd have to answer this no and yes. No, because they're all the same entity. This is the idea of the universal intelligence restricting itself into a darker and darker reality until, in a sense, it forgets that it knows everything and has to reassemble itself to regain that knowledge. In that sense, no, because they're all the same entity. In another sense, yes, because um, as we go down the tree, each Sephirah is deeper and deeper into the relative darkness. So the idea of one being more powerful, they're all the same, but as we move down, there is less of that expansive knowledge that it once had.
A channel of mine is asking, how does the wisdom of the High Priestess change when she becomes deaf on the second fool's journey?
Oh, it doesn't change. We see death and life as two separate things, and we often respond joyously to life and with despair with death. She sees the two as negative and positive on a battery. We keep coming back to the idea of polarities. We don't understand. We see death as the end of life. And if we stop for a minute, we can understand that's not really true, because all new life has to be born and developed through that which was once alive or is living now. There is that cycle. And just give me that end of that question again. I think I've gotten off on a tangent.
Does the wisdom of the High Priestess change when she becomes deaf?
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I started wondering. No, it's a universal knowledge that we don't have. We're talking the upper three Sephiroth. That's the Godhead. It's wisdom. These are things we may not be in touch with, yet we know to be true. The mystery of life and death are one thing, and the knowledge or understanding or communication of the High Priestess doesn't change. The same message is being given. Death is the other side of this life.
The High Priestess reminds me of the Hierophant card. Are their meanings similar?
I had the High Priestess out here. They certainly do look similar. Here she is. And if you hold them up, you can see the similarities. We've got what appears to be a female person seated sort of regally between two pillars. And the construction of the cards do make the two of them look similar. But they're not similar at all. The High Priestess believes that all is good. The High Priestess creates without remorse. But these two cards are on two different pillars. One is on the side of mercy and one is on the side of severity. The Hierophant, unlike the High Priestess, is very selective. She seeks the students for her teaching. She admits very few. On the side of severity or clean, she restricts, while the High Priestess has very much of an open door policy.
I read in a book that the High Priestess is about reflection and non-action. That doesn't seem to agree with what you're saying.
I know. And I'm not sure about where that came from. And I've read that sentiment, not all the time, but many times. I suspect because she is at the top of the pillar of mercy, that some people use the modern definition of mercy to think that this is compassion. That's not what this mercy means. This mercy means open to all, non-restrictive. Perhaps her seemingly calm demeanor makes her seem introspective. Here's the way I would think of the High Priestess. The magician says, I've come up with an idea. It's a car. It's an automobile. So the High Priestess says, all right, I'll help you out with that. And she makes rocks, but there's iron in the rock, so you can make steel. There's a bunch of poison gases coming out, but that's the reaction in the making of some of the fabric for the car. There's a bunch of raw oil that can be distilled into gasoline and made into plastic. And there's a bunch of trees from which rubber can be milked. The High Priestess takes the idea and makes everything that would make that idea possible. But not all those things are easy. Not all those things have intrinsic goodness in them. I hope that answers the question a bit.
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah, to me, and the way it just seems so obvious, this is a card of action, not discernment. This is a card that says, get up off your chair and do things. And if the thing you're doing isn't perfect, do it anyway. Produce. Get things out of the ether and put them on earth. Now is the time for action, and it's completion. It's not just starting a bunch of things and leaving them. It's muscling through and getting things done without a whole lot of thought of, is this perfect? Is this what's most needed right now? This is a card of creation.
Douglas Tatum says hello.
Hi, Doug.
So does, I'm going to butcher the name here, but I'll give it a try. Hong An Nguyen Din.
Hi, Hong.
Yep, that's it.
Okay. That's the end of the questions. Okay. We've talked about the High Priestess, the idea of genders and polarities. This is where the unity is split into two things. I think the main thing I'll leave you with is that this is a card of expression, production, completion. This is a card of get out there and make something. That's it for today. That's the High Priestess.
I don't know if you want to take this one.
Sure.
From Hong. Can I combine tarot and I Ching?
Yeah, I answered that question. It came through on the internet a while ago. I have great respect for the I Ching. It uses dice and anagrams, and it's ancient and it's fascinating. I think astrology may have a whole lot to do with our psychology, just like tarot does. But I am not an advocate of unification theories. I am not an advocate of people taking these bits of ancient brilliance and combining them, because it tends to water them all down. While I admire tarot immensely, and I don't have the same knowledge, but I have great respect for the I Ching, I believe they are separate, and to merge them is going to water down either one. Use them singly, but don't combine them. That's my feeling. And we'll leave it at that. That's the High Priestess, and tomorrow, or next Wednesday, we'll move on to her twin sister, the Empress. Thanks for joining in. Bye for now. Have a good day.